And here I say, on the 15th of May 2013, when MultiChoice wrote a set of proposed provisions to Mr. Mutwening that would form the basis of the MultiChoice at SABC multi-channel agreement, MultiChoice had seen an opportunity to cause a major policy shift in the digital terrestrial transformation project.
All right, so have you ever wondered how far a company will go to, well, get what it wants?
Sounds a bit ominous, doesn't it?
It does. And that's what we're diving into today. Back in 2013, there was this deal between the SABC, South Africa's public broadcaster, and MultiChoice, this big pay TV company. And, well, let's just say it raised some eyebrows.
Yeah, a deal that, at least on the surface, seemed way more beneficial for MultiChoice than the SABC. And, get this, it even seemed to go against the SABC's own goals, A&D government policy.
It's a bit of a head-scratcher, right? Like, how did this even happen?
Exactly. A real puzzle. And to try to, well, put the pieces together, we're going to be looking at the testimony of Mrs. Lulama Mokhobo.
Oh, yeah. She had a front row seat to this whole thing. She was the group executive for public broadcasting services at the SABC back then.
Right in the thick of it.
We'll be drawing from her testimony at the State Capture Inquiry. This was back in February 2020, and we'll also be taking a look at her affidavit.
So to really grasp the weight of this whole deal, we need to rewind a bit. Back then, South Africa was right in the middle of this huge shift from analog to digital broadcasting.
Like a tech revolution, right?
Exactly. And the key part of this transition was giving viewers these things called set-top boxes. You needed them to pick up the new digital signal.
I remember those. Okay, so from what I've read about Mrs. Mokhobo, she was super passionate about more than just, the tech upgrade itself. She really saw these set-top boxes as a way to bring education and opportunities to communities that were often overlooked. Kind of like leveling the playing field using technology.
Yeah, a digital dividend for the whole country, as she called it.
I was, during the phase when the broadcast digital migration policy was being developed, one of the people who were invited to give input. I was also a member of the Centec board and was intimately aware of the possibilities that were at hand. I therefore view the SABC as possibly the best placed organ of state to be at the forefront of preparing our nation to becoming a citizenry filled with hope and determination to learn and apply its learning for the greater good of family, community, and nation. The participation of the marginalized in the digital dividend and knowledge economy would indeed help make South Africa a better place for all who live in it.
But her vision went even further. She believed that these set-top boxes needed to be encrypted.
And that's where it gets interesting.
Right. So by being encrypted, the SABC would have more control over the content being broadcast.
It's about control and, even more importantly, opening up a whole bunch of possibilities. We're talking things like interactive services, like internet access, even educational programs beamed straight into people's homes, all for free.
I saw how children and their teachers would actually glow at how much they could understand concepts better, because they would have somebody who knows the subject matter better teaching to them via television. They would be able to see experiments. A lot of these schools don't have laboratories, and yet we decry the fact that we don't have enough children trained in science and mathematics. How do they get trained in those when they do not have laboratories? And secondly, when the teachers themselves do not have the appropriate qualifications or ability to impart the knowledge. So you would be able to get almost a distance learning program running throughout the country with the best teachers, and the children would be able to watch those programs. And if they could not watch them at the time when they run, and that's where the PVR functionality is so important, they could set their PVR to record the program for themselves. So when they get home, at the time when they're studying, they could switch on and watch it. The same case goes for the teachers themselves, who would be able to use the information they get to better match the information and learning requirements of their children. But as we know, the challenge does not go away, at least not right now.
So effectively, one of the points you make is that one of the advantages would have been that when, for example, we talk about...
Wow, a game changer for sure. So we've got this really inspiring vision using technology to make a real difference. Then, enter MultiChoice.
Here comes the twist.
They come in with this proposal for the SABC that, at first glance, looks like a pretty good deal.
On the surface, yeah.
It was a multi-channel agreement. Basically, the SABC would give them some exclusive channels, and in exchange, MultiChoice would pay a lot of money. Like, we're talking 500 million rand over 5 years.
Big bucks. Sounds like everyone wins, right?
You'd think so. But there's a catch. MultiChoice slipped in some conditions, and this is where things start to get really fascinating. They wanted the SABC to broadcast on unencrypted channels.
This completely throws a wrench in Ms. Mokhobo's whole vision of control. And even worse, it clashes directly with the government's stance on the whole digital migration thing.
The SABC channel supply proposal, number one, the SABC will provide MCA with the following channels: an exclusive entertainment channel, SABC Premium, and a 24-hour news channel, SABC News. In return for the delivery of the channels listed above by SABC, MultiChoice will pay the SABC a flat fee of 500 million rand, payable over a period of 5 years. The SABC will bear the full cost for the production of the channels. The SABC shall retain all advertising generated on these channels. The entertainment channel will be exclusive to MCA, and MCA will be authorized to distribute the entertainment channel on its distribution platforms. The SABC News channel will be exclusive to MCA's satellite platform, and MCA will be authorized to distribute the SABC News channel on all its distribution platforms. The SABC will, however, be allowed to distribute the SABC News channel on its own free-to-air DTT platform, subject to point 9 below. I suppose I should go directly to point 9 below?
Yes.
The offer presupposes that all SABC channels on its DTT platform will be made available to the public unencrypted, without a conditional access system, and thereby incidentally receivable by the MCA DTT decoder.
Thank you. And that becomes the issue that you raised at the meeting of the 6th of June 2013.
Yes.
Could you just quickly go to paragraphs 11.1 and 11.2, where you deal with the proposed terms of the agreement that you canvassed largely at the meeting? That would, we are now at page 72. Back to page 72.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
What would you like me to?
Yes, if you turn the page,
yes.
This is where you discuss the terms that were contentious,
yes.
That were discussed points 9 and point 10 of the draft agreement that was submitted, I believe, at the meeting, that was debated at the meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. Could you just quickly tell the Chair why did you have a problem with those particular clauses?
Chair, I had a very serious problem with point 9.
I'm sorry, Ms. Norman, will that cover paragraph 11? Okay.
That is paragraph 11, Chair.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Paragraph 11.
Yes.
Are you there?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Paragraph 11. Should I read paragraph 11?
Yes, you can read, yeah.
Yes, yes.
On 6 June 2013, the SABC Interim Board and MCA's Chairman, Mr. Lidele, CEO, Mr. Imtiaz Patel, together with Mr. Greg Hamburger, met to discuss the substance of the future multi-channel agreement as a follow-up to the letter referred to in point 9 above. Of particular contention, as may be gleaned from the verbatim minutes of the said meeting, were two provisions that effectively dictated the SABC's 2008 digital migration broadcast policy-based strategy on set-top box encryption. They state, point 9, the offer presupposes that all SABC channels on its DTT platform will be made available to the public unencrypted without a conditional access system, and thereby incidentally receivable by the MCA DTT decoder. Point 10 states MCA, the SABC, Centec, if required, work together to promote carriage of all the SABC's free-to-air channels on the SABC free-to-air multiplex will be made available to MCA satellite platform, subject to available capacity. This is in order to enable the SABC to generate revenue from day one. Point 12, this is where I begin to explain why the two clauses were problematic. I was joined by SABC board member Mr. Mavuso in categorically stating that point 9 and 10 were not enforceable through the future multi-channel agreement and entirely dependent on the Department of Communications and governments deciding to amend the 2008 BDM policy to reflect the change. Moreover, the DOC had begun a must carry regulations review process which could ultimately lead to the SABC being paid for any channels that were broadcast through MCA and other satellite platforms. So essentially, Chair, we were sitting with people with very serious commercial interests who effectively wanted to dominate the market by hook or crook. And they saw the SABC as probably the most critical organization which could lend credence to their attempt at basically taking the entire market over and shutting out anybody who tried to be a dissenter. The BDM policy of 2008, as far as I was concerned, as the person who had been placed in that organization, to not only run it, safeguard its duty in the current state and in the future, and ensure that from all perspectives of its mission and vision, that it covered them. And the core mission of the SABC was to empower the citizenry of South Africa. And how do you empower the citizenry if you do not do it via information? Best placed organization to provide on-the-spot information throughout the country without filters. Now, the citizens would, at the time, and I think it is worse now, Chair, with the losses of jobs that we're seeing in the country, with the deepening of employment crisis and the deepening of poverty, they deserved to be given an opportunity to have access to any piece of information that they would need. An encrypted DTT box would enable a return path that would enable a citizen sitting anywhere in the country, for as long as they had a TV set, even the old black and white box, would be able to work through the set-top box, would be able to search for information on the internet using that box. We had also, and this was also a policy provision, and I do cover that later, but if you will allow me, that's okay. We had also been enjoined through the BDM policy to ensure that the set-top boxes would have a return path. And that return path would enable a telephone capability, whether it would be via a cord or if, with the sophistication that we have in the country now, via Bluetooth or whatever means. And with Telkom also being a state entity, coming on board as a provider of telephony countrywide to enable also over and above its core function of enabling people to talk to each other via the phone, but to enable access to their internet network that would come through the set-top box. So effectively, old people, young people in faraway places would not have to travel the distances that they would need to travel to get to any place where they would require help, whether it would be for registering a child's death, for registering an old lady to receive pension, and for all manner of things that I cannot, off the top of my head, mention right now. The list is too long.
That would include internet cafes and so on.
Yes.
Young people would have to try and go in distances to look for those.
Indeed, Chair. And the beauty of it all is they would not have to spend a penny because they would have their own internet cafe at home. They would be able to go in and do their research. I'm very passionate about education, Chair. I come from an educator background. I'm very, very passionate about education. And we know how in trouble our schooling system is, how our children continue to not do well. And not very long ago, there was a research document that was published which suggested that the standard of education in our country seems to be going lower instead of getting better.
I wouldn't be surprised if that is true.
Indeed, Chair.
I wouldn't be surprised. I watch celebrations about matric results, and I think that the families whose children celebrate their achievements are entitled to celebrate. That's good. But I think we don't put enough emphasis on many learners who didn't make it up to matric. And I think that recently it was said that in terms of Africans, that figure is about half, if I'm not, or even more than half, if you look at those who started together at grade 1, that by the time that class reaches matric and passes, it's not less than half who didn't go up to matric. They drop out or stop at some stage. And when we celebrate those who have achieved, we need to worry about those as well who have been lost in the system. So I share your passion for education.
Thank you, Chair.
Hold on. So they wanted exclusive SABC content and to control the entire set-top box system. It seems like a huge ask, especially going against what the government wanted. I'm curious, how did Ms. Mokhobo and the SABC handle that curveball?
Well, that's a story for after the break.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
Okay, so MultiChoice throws this curveball, wants unencrypted channels. It just seems to go against everything the SABC was working toward. I'm on the edge of my seat here. What happened next? Was everyone okay with MultiChoice's demands?
Well, not exactly. Imagine this. There's this really important meeting, and Mrs. Mokhobo and another board member are fighting tooth and nail against these unencrypted clauses.
I can only imagine the tension in that room.
They're saying this goes against everything. It's against government policy. It's against what the SABC stands for, serving all South Africans.
Makes sense. But was everyone on the same page?
Yeah.
Or was there like a split within the SABC itself? Ah, that's where the SABC's inner workings get super interesting. You've got Ms. Mokhobo and her allies standing firm. But then you've got other officials, including the acting CEO, who seem more open to MultiChoice's proposal.
Whoa, even with all the red flags.
Yeah, definitely not a united front. And just to make things even more complicated, MultiChoice made it clear that these clauses were non-negotiable, like take it or leave it. So the SABC is in this tough spot with a lot of pressure. Makes you wonder what was going on in the minds of those who were willing to say yes.
I know. Was it just a difference in opinion, or were there maybe some other factors at play? External pressures, personal motivations, who knows? It really starts to get complicated here. And then, to make it even more confusing, things take a pretty big turn while Mrs. Mokhobo's out of the picture.
While she's on leave, the agreement is signed without her. And guess what? It includes those controversial clauses, almost exactly as MultiChoice wanted them.
Wow, a bit of a slap in the face, right? Not only was the agreement signed without her, it seems like they completely disregarded all of her concerns. This just raises so many questions about the SABC's decision-making. Were there outside influences at play?
You can't help but wonder, right? And to make things even murkier, the SABC chairperson publicly contradicts Mrs. Mokhobo's whole stance on set-top box control.
Didn't an independent report come out around this time that basically said the SABC was, well, a mess?
Yep. The report found that the SABC basically had two centers of power, the CEO and the acting CEO, which led to a lot of chaos and dysfunction. It's a recipe for disaster, really. Especially with MultiChoice pushing from the outside, definitely paints a chaotic picture of what was happening behind the scenes.
Man, it's just layer upon layer of complexity. It's not just about a deal with MultiChoice anymore. This is about who's really in charge at the public broadcaster and how they're using that power. And Ms. Mokhobo's stuck trying to navigate all of this.
Right. And she wasn't just any executive. She was responsible for making sure the SABC actually fulfilled its public duty. Trying to push her out of that position would have had huge implications for the organization and its direction.
Absolutely. So what happened with these attempts to get rid of Ms. Mokhobo? Where did they come from, and how did she handle it?
It's wild, right? The SABC is going through this massive tech change. There's all this drama happening internally, and then you've got this huge corporation, MultiChoice, putting on the pressure, and Ms. Mokhobo is in the middle of it all, trying to make sure this technology actually benefits everyone in South Africa.
The stakes were really high. Don't forget, the SABC is like the main source of news and information for millions of people.
If it's not working right, that's a problem for the whole country. So what about those attempts to get rid of Ms. Mokhobo? What actually went down? Well, she said it all started pretty early on. She suggested that the acting CEO, a Mr. Mutsuning, should be removed because his management style was causing so much disruption. But instead of being taken seriously, she claims she actually got into serious trouble just for bringing it up.
That's like they weren't too keen on anyone rocking the boat.
Yeah, and it escalated from there. Ms. Mokhobo described his behavior as deliberately obstructive, said he blocked her staff from submitting documents, and basically made it a hostile work environment.
Oh man, what a mess. Did she just put up with it, or did she push back?
She definitely pushed back. She believed that Mr. Mutsuning wanted her gone because she was standing in his way. She wouldn't do anything she thought was illegal or unethical, which put her at odds with those who were, well, a little more flexible.
That takes guts, especially when you're up against people who seem pretty set on silencing anyone who disagrees. Did she face any consequences for speaking out?
She said she did. There was this one incident during a meeting about the digital migration rollout. The SABC chairperson, Ms. Chibala, just straight up announced that they were dropping set-top box control.
What? Just like that? No discussion? No board approval?
Apparently not. Ms. Mokhobo contacted another board member who was like, nope, no decision's been made. Seemed like Ms. Chibala was acting on her own.
So no respect for the rules and completely ignoring Mrs. Mokhobo's authority. Did she just let it go?
Nope, she reported it to her superiors. She pointed out that this is a huge breach of protocol. But instead of getting support, she said Ms. Chibala retaliated, accusing her of breaking confidentiality.
It's like classic silencing tactic. Makes you wonder how often this kind of thing happens when people try to do the right thing. So circling back to what we were talking about earlier, do you think this whole deal was a clear case of state capture?
Honestly, it's tricky. There's definitely evidence that points to political interference, but it's all tangled up with those internal power struggles.
Yeah, hard to tell what's motivated by outside forces and what's just personal ambition.
The state capture inquiry did a lot of work to untangle all of this, but even though they finished and gave their findings, the questions raised by Mrs. Mokhobo's testimony are still relevant. How do we make sure something like this doesn't happen again? How do we protect public institutions from these kinds of influences and keep them accountable?
It's about transparency, accountability, and just basic ethical behavior, right?
Yeah.
And we all have a role to play in holding our leaders and institutions responsible for their actions.
This whole story really shows how dangerous unchecked power can be and how important it is to protect those who speak truth to power.
Well, this deep dive into the SABC MultiChoice deal has been a wild ride. Corporate maneuvering, political influence, and some serious individual courage. There are definitely no easy answers here, but it's clear that this story is far from over. The fight for a truly independent and accountable SABC continues.
So effectively, one of the points you make is that one of the advantages would have been that when, for example, we talk about challenges about maths and science teachers and maths and science as subjects in very many schools in our country, and talk about the fact that very many schools don't have qualified maths and science teachers, this could have resulted in a situation where a teacher who is very well qualified could actually be accessed in a way by millions in the country if he or she was teaching maths or science, so that even though you might not have a qualified teacher in maths and science, you could benefit quite a lot from these teachers who might be providing lessons through this program.
Indeed, Chair.
Yeah.
And I know that MultiChoice will probably argue that they do have a learning channel on their platform, and that learning channel provides for that. Remember, the fact of the matter is, millions, actually, of South Africans cannot afford to pay those subscription fees.
Exactly.
They
Yes.
cannot. And what happens is, if they fail to pay, they are unplugged. They are
Yes.
switched off.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the whole argument that the SABC, people like myself, who wanted encryption, wanted to be able to switch citizens off, it was the most nonsensical argument ever, Chair. There is no way that anybody would switch anybody off. But people would be able to get access to their education at zero cost to themselves. All they needed to have is the electricity to run the TV, is to be able to connect the port, is to be, the PVR
Yeah.
functionality would enable them. That is all, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.